EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And for some, it's a wet morning for sure. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But today, I have a couple of cool things. We are talking about National Preparedness Month, and we have a really unique experience that you can do if you live in the New York metropolitan area with Tactivate and Jesse Levin. And Tactivate, we'll get into that in a second, but it's a really cool program, and they have their the Readiness Collective and a couple things like that. And I think that's really important, a lot of fun, especially during this time of Disaster Preparedness Month. But let's get into this disaster preparedness. Dan, where are you?
I'm here. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Dan, President.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning, the President, now the President of Region 9, IAM Region 9.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that.
I appreciate that. And everybody, thank you for who supported me through this election process. I'm very humbled and honored to have been chosen, and I really, truly am. I was talking to Dan about this yesterday, and it's really kind of blows me away a little bit, but we have a lot of work to do. Thanks, thanks. You have a good day, too. Hey, what are you guys doing over the College for Disaster Preparedness Month?
We're going to be pushing out just a weekly post on little items they can do. Students can do around not only around home, but in being prepared for if an incident takes place on campus, working with the communications director to push that information out on a weekly basis. And then we're going to be doing a push, because the second week of class next week, on our ENS system and how that works and what to expect when those messages get pushed out.
Right. Awesome. Well, that's good stuff right there. And everybody should be having something to do for National Preparedness Month. And hey, I want to bring Jesse in now because his whole life right now is about disaster preparedness. Thank you, Todd.
Hey, Jess,
how's it going?
Hey, congratulations. I had no idea about that. I saw that like a couple days ago, but that's awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was great, and I think I'm looking forward to doing a lot more work here in the region. Just picking up after what Yuri was doing, and just kind of pushing the profession across the goal line for sure.
Good deal.
So National Preparedness Month. Jess, I mean, I know I explained a little bit what you guys do beforehand, but talk about your program, Tactivate, and then talk about that van, that ambulance behind you.
Sure. So Tactivate's something we launched after Haiti, so it was 2010. We came back to the States, and the macro kind of concept is we pair special operations veterans when they go on terminal leave and transition out with entrepreneurs, and we launch startups as a way to teach the folks transitioning how the skills are relevant post-service. And then any funding that we make in any respective project, we use to conduct what we call expeditionary entrepreneurial operations, where we send small, very specialized teams on a voluntary basis into disaster zones to do all kinds of stuff, from the traditional disaster response, last mile logistics, local capacity building, and economic stability efforts. And all the private sector stuff we've done: climbing gyms, co-working spaces, nightclubs, and the current project, the Readiness Collective. And in all of them, behind the scenes, what we've been trying to do for well over a decade is just to figure out, to crack the nut on how to socialize readiness, right? How to kind of take it out of this weird prepper fringe, the world is ending, zombie apocalypse, let me go buy a bunch of MREs and assault rifles and hide in my basement perspective, and just say, hey, no, it's more of a discipline and a practice. It's a lifestyle. It has far more implication than just an emergency. And in fact, it positively impacts every facet of your life. And how can we kind of broaden the aperture and onboard more folks into this world? So we're sitting in the current experimental project, which is we're calling the Readiness Collective, a 6,000 square foot kind of emergency readiness training social club in a mall of all places in Norwalk, Connecticut. And the truck behind me is we partnered up with a local Land Rover Fairfield. And it's a World War II ambulance truck, fully restored, and it's actually our podcast studio in the back there.
That's so cool. The idea of readiness, and I like the idea of the Readiness Collective, because you're taking it that like whole the fear factor out of it, and you're taking the stigma off of what preparedness is or what readiness is, and kind of moving it to readiness. The idea of readiness outside of preparedness. And I always think about like my dad. My dad was born in 1930. He grew up in the Depression, end of World War II, that type of stuff. And he always, like, around our house, we've always had stuff, right? And, it was just like a thing. They not a hoarder in a way, but like in a way of like having, we might need to use this at some point and put it in a special place, right? But we've gotten away from that, right? Minimalism and things like this. And are we less prepared today than we were then? I would say yes. But how do we get back to that like idea of gardening, the idea of having things ready, not knowing that you can run down to the Home Depot down the street, that type of stuff? How do we change that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, look, our perspective, like, there's no truth with a capital T. There's no one way to do this, right? And like when we drop into a disaster zone, you have to see the positive in every approach and what every institution or resource community brings to the table. But what we chose to kind of focus on is, I think Readiness has a really big branding problem, right? It's every time someone walks by here, we built this place look really weird because they kind of poke their head in and they say, "What the heck are you guys doing in there?" And the first inclination is, "Oh, is that like a zombie apocalypse prepper store?" And it's like when we use that to start the conversation, we're like, well, so what does readiness mean to you? And the corollary that we always use is like, hey, look, what we're trying to accomplish is what CrossFit did for physicality and making it communal and tribal, right? And there's incredible, amazing operators out there. I mean, everything from like the Tom Brown tracker schools of the world to the Wim Hofs to the Fieldcraft Survivals. We view readiness as this holistic practice, anything from awareness to breath work. But at the end of the day, it's community. It's who knowing your neighbor is like the most important thing. Absolutely. And what folks think is like, okay, I need to go and I need to buy a bunch of junk, stock up on X, Y, and Z. And certainly like having key supplies and tools is important and part of the big picture. But it just really, as a society, we've gotten so far away from this idea of capability and capacity, right? And the way we define readiness is the capability and capacity to be of service to self, family, and community in uncommon times. And that's not just an emergency, right? These skills, this mindset happens to be useful if the power goes out for 6 days. But, when you start to look into things like situational awareness, you look at, breath control, how to keep calm under duress, and you start acquiring these skills that make you just simply, in the most literal sense of the term, a more competent and capable human. It changes the way you look at the world, how you interact with people, how you build your businesses, how you conduct your relationships. And we're just trying to expose folks, kind of like as a gateway drug. Like, come in here, take a really, cool, lightweight medical course. And all of a sudden, like, these opportunities avail themselves where you get to actually help someone. And then once that happens, it becomes a super addictive. I want to get better. I want to become more capable. Right? It's like the marijuana of readiness, right?
That's a good one.
So, that's what we're after anyway. Being in a mall is like a challenge in of itself, but we bit off a lot on this one, launching like the middle of a global pandemic in a retail shop in a mall.
Right. Why not
trying to get people to stock up on their edibles?
Yeah, exactly.
When it happens,
That's our true like community service, like MO. Happy.
Well, with the work that you're doing, do you see? I mean, this is a more of a personal question on how you view what you're doing. Do you see a difference between preparedness and readiness?
Great question. Yeah, I think that let's call preparedness like a specialized, like in the context that it's typically viewed in, right? You're prepared for X, Y, and Z event, like natural disaster or something more sinister, what have you. Readiness, we view again like diet and exercise. It's something that needs to be cultivated and certainly leads into preparedness. But it's much more, the stuff we have going on in here is anything from like seed saving and pickling to, how to understand, misinformation, disinformation, how that affects the psyche, to, medical, teaching kids to, change tires. I mean, it's just this like broad swath. And, what we're attempting to do is to make, people desire to be ready, to be capable, and to be competent. And I think that's a little bit different than preparedness, although it's kind of leads into preparedness, if that makes sense.
Right. I teach CERT, and I see Stacy's on here, battalion chief now from LA City Fire Department. And, I taught CERT with her as well. So teaching CERT was like, hey, getting people prepared for disasters and volunteerism and stuff like that's associated with it. What I think is funny is we go through these programs like that. And then at times government, we make fun of, not make fun of, but we go, hey, don't be a prepper, right? Because that seems to be a bad thing. How do we skirt that line of being prepared, but not being paranoid, I suppose? How do we skirt that line?
Again, like, we've been trying to explore that forever, right? And what we do, like we had a bar, in Miami, right? And there was a bunch of firefighters and veterans working at the bar, and we called it ourselves a survival training bar, but for the folks in Miami, it was just a bar with good music and whatnot. And they showed up because they understand what a bar is, right? And they want to have fun. But before they could buy a drink, we say, hey, you know how to tie a bowline? Hey, you know what a tourniquet is? And we'd kind of challenge them on these skills, right? And like sort of inception them, like seep these things into these folks' lives in a totally innocuous way that just caught them totally off by surprise. So, I think that it needs to be presented and repackaged, and we need to make the notion of being capable of service. I want every high school to become an EMT, right? Like I think, once the idea of joining your local volunteer fire department becomes like the coolest, sexiest thing you can do, we will have solved that problem. Until then, people view preparedness as like the old ham radio guys, or, the crazy folks that are missing a couple of teeth with a, case of Coors Light sitting in their bunker. And, I think that's starting to change. And, all these recent occurrences, like I think the pendulum is swinging and people are now more receptive to the idea of readiness. But I think there's still a massive opportunity to just reposition the whole shebang, right? and I mean, so it's great, but again, it's a very specific way of, targeting what has turned out to be a very specific subset of the community. So how do we broaden that, amplify that, support that, and go beyond?
Right. So what is your target audience? Because like we've kind of touched on it, previous in a few of the comments that we've made, and you see preparedness. It's one of those things that you have to target a specific audience in a specific way. We mentioned the zombies, right? There is a zombie emergency response training team, or that the ZERT is what they call it. And that's how they get their people in the door for preparing and being ready and being tactically ready as well. It's more of a tactical response type training, but there's preparedness aspects of it. And then you have like the different things that the PG&E is doing, like child preparedness, and there's I mean, you can't package it in one way. It has to be packaged in all these different ways. Do you have a specific niche, specific target that you're going after?
Sorry, my dog just came in. We're using this space. This first space is a lab, right? This is the first kind of dedicated training club we've ever opened. So there's no like climbing gym facet, there's no bar facet. It is a readiness training club. And what we are, trying to do is figure that out, quite frankly, and how. I know a lot of people, and I've never met like Mike Glover, for example, Fieldcraft Survival, but I know as part of his origin story, he had this like really cool, deep philosophy behind what he was doing with Fieldcraft Survival, but couldn't really get people to come because everybody wanted to do shooting, right? Like the first, I want to shoot, I want to be a shooter. So, okay, I can run shooting classes, right? I've got that experience. So that's what he used as his gateway, right? And I don't want to speak for him. I might have misunderstood there, but I track, what those guys do a good bit. And so you have to meet the community where they're at. And for us, that's a challenge because we're trying to combat so many of the stigmas and so much of like, we've got this philosophy, you have to learn to earn your right to purchase. So before you can really buy anything that requires skills, we want to teach you and almost certify you on it before you can actually purchase anything. So people come in here, I want to buy a go bag. I want to buy, hey, can you teach me how to shoot? And we try to walk them back and say, hey, well, there's a lot more that goes into this than just, having your concealed carry, blah, 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 and buying, a bunch of stuff you're going to throw in your basement and forget about not how to use anyway. I can't say, we're constantly changing what we do in here programmatically. We're about to shift and do a lot of stuff with kids and kind of turn it into an escape room environment to see, how that goes. But, we've had like the, younger dads, like 20 dads in here training and drinking beers and their kids training up front. And we've had, local SRT teams in here training with North American Rescue. We've really kind of nailed a super broad swath.
Right.
Our emphasis is less on tactical, we bring in the law enforcement veteran kind of military side as the instructor, but our goal is to really figure out how we can reach the folks who would never either otherwise know this world exists. People, there's a couple more disadvantaged towns around here that, couldn't afford to really, make ready. We're trying to figure out how to attract those folks. And then like the yoga mom, the hedge fund guy, the dog walker. I mean, just we want to make this, just commonplace. Like it's just a part of everyone's everyday routine.
Yeah, we're gonna take a break here in a couple of seconds, but I want to address a couple of the comments. And one is the preparedness guy says, "Be prepared, but not quote too prepared." Kind of making fun. But I think the question is can we be not too prepared, right? That's probably not the right word to use, but be prepared but not paranoid. I think would be the way to really to say that. And then Elaine says, I suggest that many high schools and college students take ICS course package to pad the resume at no cost. Won't get the job in the emergency management, but yet it shows potential employer initiative to learn the terms that you're hearing on TV and more continuity, recovery, and response. And that's definitely people want to get into the profession. And not only that, I mean, people in general should understand the nomenclature of what we're saying. So that's a good statement. And then, of course, Stacy says, right now with COVID, people need to understand now more than ever that you need to be prepared and be able to shelter. And it might not be a good message this time. The what if game, that we play. We know without COVID, we know that people without COVID are dying because they're afraid to go to the hospital, and that's a bad statement right there. But yeah, I think this shows that we do have to be prepared. And as I say, the toilet paper shortage that we had back at the beginning of COVID kind of shows that people will start buying anything during panic. So there's that. Hey guys, let's take a quick break, and we come back. I want to talk about what's going on right now in the world with the floods and the hurricanes and tornadoes and whatnots. Hey all, how you guys doing? Hey, if you're headed over to the National Homeland Security Conference in Las Vegas from August 30th to September 2nd, I want you to stop by and see my friend Sean Griffin and his team at Disaster Tech. They are the leading decision science platform for risk and resilience. See, and be sure to stop by booth 205 and learn how Disaster Tech's DICE solution can help your team plan and exercise across government and industry, leverage data and risk intelligence, and accelerate evidence-based decision-making, and ultimately save lives, money, and time. And hey, also follow them on Twitter at disaster-tech-inc for more updates. That's disaster-tech-inc. See you there. Yeah, so today's the last day of that conference. I'm talking to some people that were over there, and they said I was having a good time and learning a lot of good information. I know a few of the speakers on that as well. So good times. All right, well, let's come back in. Let's talk about the hurricane and then I guess what the whip around that happened in New York. I was looking at some video this morning on the subways of looks like a waterfall coming into the subways in New York City. What's going on over there? And it seems like this was sort of out of the blue, like you're saying earlier this morning. Was this something that people were tracking?
I mean, we're about an hour north. Up in Connecticut, and we've been so focused on Afghanistan. Like I haven't really been tracking it super closely, but it really kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, we were far more prepared for what was the last one, Henry. We're all just kind of camped out at the firehouse, and it went like, it didn't even rain. I mean, like it was supposed to be this whole big deal, and this one, we got all available responders. Went in last night, and I think New York got 3.8 inches of water like in an hour or something like that. Insane. And up here we got spanked. There's power lines down everywhere, pole fires everywhere, significant flooding, and it just goes to show you. I'm not a statistician, I'm not a big data guy, but these things are just happening a lot more frequently.
Yeah,
and they're getting worse too. I mean, they're affecting us. Well, that's the argument, right? Are they getting worse, or are more people in the way of them? Right, because more people are moving into these areas that are affected by these things. So the argument there, it depends on the specifics of the jurisdiction. But are they getting worse, or are just more people being affected by them, and those people are not prepared to be able to respond to them and take care of themselves during these events?
Yeah, no, it's wild. I don't know. We've been doing this like almost full time in one way or another since like 2009 or 8, right? And there's been massive shifts in the professional side of things, right? Switching from public-private partnerships to private-public, like the vernacular has changed. The focus has really started to shift on proactive readiness versus reactionary response. And, that's a sea change. That's going to take a long time. That's a systemic shift in perspective, resource allocation, all of these things. And it's going that way. But from the civilian side, we like to say that, if you're complacent at this point, you're complicit. Right. I think a lot of this just comes down to, and we can talk about Afghanistan, like a lot of this just like, we don't take personal responsibility for ourselves these days. And we put so much, not trust, that's the wrong word, but we count so much on government. And this is not a slight at government. This is not to say that government resources are not entirely capable, but we've become so comfortable and so dependent that we no longer take basic responsibility for ourselves, our families, our communities. We have just passed the buck. First responders, our doctors, And at the end of the day, like anyone who really works in the arena, whether they're a local first responder or law enforcement or an emergency management, they know viscerally how thin the system is, right? There's just not a lot of folks. There's not a lot of resources. And people don't understand that, especially a lot of these smaller towns where they're volunteer departments. And it's not to say, hey, be scared, no one's coming. Like there's some really good people, like they're doing their best. But at the end of the day, like we're gonna have a really increasingly big problem in this country if people just don't take onus. And taking self-responsibility is not a thing. It's not really part of our culture anymore. We're more of a blame, pass the buck, point the finger. And that's I think one of the greatest threats to society currently. Sorry about a bit of a tangent there, but I think that's
no, it's accurate.
I mean, I know I want to get into this too a little bit because you were helping out with getting people out of Afghanistan, and I think that's one of the things that we have to think about as well, that we're no longer just in our own backyard, in our little cul-de-sac in the suburbs, right? We are now globally looking at things. We're linked globally. I have some friends of mine that are up in Canada that I've worked with, and they're Afghan. His wife is from Afghanistan. And they had to get family over there work with the Canadian government. Talk a little bit about what you did specifically to help get people out.
So yeah, I don't even remember how we got looped into this, but inevitably when something goes down, we're getting a call from someone. I'm not prior service. I've done a lot of work with the community. We're very involved with the international, humanitarian response, kind of arena and ecosystem. And we got pulled into the Slack channels and the Signal channels, and we're very involved with the veteran community. And again, I don't want to get into the political side of it, but when we say expeditionary entrepreneurship, I think people would be astounded by the impact that they can have as individuals, even without any kind of understanding or professional exposure to emergency management, disaster response, because at the end of the day, a lot of it is about who you know, right? And we have a massive issue in Afghanistan, right? And before you get into the politics and the macros, the micros, and what's going on, at the end of the day, there's also an acute situation that needs to be addressed, and that is getting our partner forces out, our American citizens out. And again, not getting into like fake news or anything about the narrative, but in every major disaster that we have been involved with or responded to, the narrative that is portrayed publicly is exceedingly different than the ground truth and the realities. And I don't say that, to cast aspersions or maliciously. I think a lot of times it's very hard to get at the root of issues. It's very hard to get the accurate numbers, especially something as dire and as tumultuous as what's going on in Afghanistan. That said, a lot of incredible groups stood up, predominantly veteran centric, folks who've been over there, and this there's just like this baseline integrity, right? Like that's core to being an American, right? And we gave our word. We were involved with the conflict. This has nothing to do with whether we should have been there or whether we needed to exit. I think a lot of folks actually involved would agree that maybe we shouldn't have even been there and we should definitely get out. And in this vacuum, there's a lot of awful things happening and a lot of very, American citizens not getting out, not being contacted by government at all. Still, let's be very clear about that, like to this day. And I don't want to cast aspersions. It's a hard thing to do, and I'm not blaming anyone. But it was incredible, as always, to be a part of this kind of informal, ad hoc rescue efforts, right? And there's folks that are incredibly well funded who represent, and I'm not going to mention any names, but large foundations. There's folks who've operationalized and that are far more public, like Operational Pineapple Express. I have a lot of veterans, and it's incredible. And this is there's nothing wrong with civilians, prior service, anyone taking proactive action to get things done. Now, you have to look at things like there's huge security risks, there's operational security risks, there's identity, there's, not having a clear understanding of what's going on the ground, especially with something like dealing with the Afghan issue.
Right.
But what I will say is I think in times when there's resource vacuums, it is very important that individuals know that they can step up and have massive impact, whether they know funding, they have funding relationships, or they know logistics people, whether they have airline connections. And what came together was astounding, to watch, humbling to be a part of. And in a small way, we were lucky, not lucky is the wrong word, but we were able to contribute and help in a small part and get, confirmed 22, families out. But we were just a small cog, in that, incredibly large, informal machine, which was just awesome.
Right. Well, Jesse, thank you for that, for doing that, because I think that's important for the people that were over in Afghanistan to get them out that needed to come out. And it's just, it is a dynamic situation. And yeah, and again, staying out of the politics on things, it's just helping people that are in need at the end of the day. And that's what this is all about, not about who voted for who and what politics are going on. So I think that's really important. Oh man. So, hey, real quick, I just saw Katie just popped on a comment saying, yes, preach, Jesse. Yeah. And she's actually going to be our guest here talking about preparedness and what she's doing. And she has a great blog, by the way. And we'll post that next week. But I just wanted to say hi really quick to her. And so how can people learn more about what you guys are doing over at Tactivate and what you guys are doing with the Readiness Collective?
I think people just need to have a willingness, like, to have more of an open mind. Like, I love what Katie's doing, right? Like, she's like also completely repositioning readiness and making it more of a practice, right? She's kind of incorporating yoga and just phrasing it differently and programming it differently and making it just so accessible and like non-fear based, right? And taking it out of the hardcore EM, and not there's anything wrong with that, but just, again, broadening the aperture. And I think folks just need to really aggressively, just like people are into the, this whole entrepreneurial efficiency, life hacking, Tim Ferriss, stuff.
Right.
They need to start looking at readiness in the same light. It is, in our opinion, everyone's responsibility to be, capable of service. And that's not like a millennial snowflake unicorn comment, like, oh, we all have to be do-gooders. It's like, no, we have an obligation to take care of ourselves and our families and our communities. And if we really truly value our frontline workers and our doctors, as we all put out there in Virtue Signal, we need to reduce the burden on them. And we do that by becoming more capable ourselves, right? So I think people need to start Googling or getting involved, or just saying, hey, I might not know the first dang thing about any of this stuff, but sure, join CERT, get your CPR, take a Stop the Bleed class, like, just start somewhere. And very quickly, I think people understand, like, the gift and the inspiration that it is to, like, have the capacity and mindset to help other people in time of need.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm going to go on the opposite side of that. I don't think that's a unicorn, millennial or Gen Z, snowflake thing. Because if you going back to my dad's generation or even before, right? I mean, that's what community really was, right? Back in the 1930s, 1940s. I mean, the community came together. If you remember, right? None of us here in this room remember, but if you guys ever watched any the Little Rascal TV movies that were on when we were kids, that were the replays. These kids are going around collecting bottles and glass and things like this for the war effort, right? Things like that, or for their community. So, I mean, this is where we used to be as a nation. I think we can get back there again of taking care of our neighbors and being good to each other. I think if we could do that at the end of the day, I think we're all going to be better for it. Absolutely. Eileen talked to the pillowcase program, and Red Cross teaches kids about preparedness and gives tools to bring home to their parents. I think that's a really cool program as well. I think stuff that Jesse, what you're doing in the mall, I think is outstanding. And I know not everybody's in the Connecticut, and I know not everybody's in the New York metropolitan area as well. But I mean, what do you think the people that are, say, I don't know, in the middle of Oklahoma or whatever, what can they do maybe to learn more about preparedness?
Email me, email Katie. I mean, we're all I think anyone who's really vested in, or Todd, all you guys who are vested in actually building true community capacity, there isn't any competition, right? There's such a massive need, whether you're non-for-profit or for-profit, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't, there is so much to do. And there's amazing people all over the place doing incredible work, right? And there's just awesome training facilities, clubs, happy to get folks tied in or find the best resources that we've potentially worked with in the past, and just, at the end of the day, again, it's network. It's who and it's just taking that effort to kind of reach out and show that interest, and then I think you can very quickly get involved.
Yeah, and we got the preparedness guy in here too. You can reach out to. I bet you can find him, and he'd be happy to talk to you as well. So, Dan, you got anything else at the end of here?
Just that you've heard me say this before, and I've been studying it pretty heavily over the last year. Marketing. I feel every emergency manager needs to know how to market what they do, and they need to know how to market it to the people that they serve and beyond, to their communities, and what it is that we do, how the people can get involved, how they can get trained, why it's important. We need to be marketers, and I've been studying that for pretty heavily over the last 6 months. But over the last year, I got involved in more learning how to market what it is that we do how we do it, and why it's important. And so for all those that are listening, for all those that are watching right now, do some research on marketing, learn how to market what we do and why it's important.
Absolutely.
Hey, you're hired. You come help us.
And as Brian says, hey Brian, I don't know if you're near the computer or not, but I want you to pop in a second if you can. But there he is. Brian, you always talk about the idea of selling yourself. What do you mean by that?
Having interacted with you as much as I have over the last flipping 20 long years, a lot of complaints come back, and learning to sell yourself and sell the value in the programs you're putting together is key. And it goes hand in hand with the marketing. More traditional marketing is finding a new audience. However, selling what you're doing up and down that chain of command, I think, is what lacks. I mean, take COVID, for example. Has anybody seen a single emergency manager online or on TV talking about what they're doing for their community? I personally haven't. And if a lot of the complaints with emergency managers are no one listens, I can't get the funding, but learn to get out there and sell yourself and prove your value. Just like a salesman proves the value of that vacuum they're trying to sell you at the doorstep, you've got to learn to sell the value in what you put your career into. And that's what I mean by selling.
Right.
And we all sell. People, I'm not a salesman. You've been selling your entire life. Mom, I want another cookie. Teacher, I really deserved an A. Dad, I really don't want to go to practice. You've been selling your entire life. Suck it up, embrace it, and learn to sell. That's all I got.
Awesome, Brian.
Solid nugget right there. Duly noted, sir. I'm on it.
So we come in here talking about disaster preparedness. We walk away with a philosophical idea of selling emergency management to the public, which I think is important as well. But Jesse, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything that you do. We're coming here close to the end here. And again, reach out to him, find Tactivate. We're going to put his information. It is in the show notes. If you're driving down the road, your pencil's not sharp, that's okay. Just click on the show notes and you will be able to get to him. And there's the information right there. It's the readinesscollective.com. Great place. The videos that they produce are freaking top notch. I just like watching them. I watch them over again. And they also have, real quick, I want you to pitch your documentary, The So.
Oh, that was something a good buddy of ours, Mike, did. He was actually running video for the UN recently, but we were involved with Puerto Rico for an extended period of time and did an economic stability project there and kind of reconnecting remote point of sale systems to get the EBT cards going to kind of generate, last mile economic stimulus even during the acute response phase. And the documentary won a bunch of awards. Mikey and the team did a great job, and we were fortunate enough to be featured as one of the kind of efforts that took place during Maria.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Hey, thank you everybody for being here today. And hey, listen, follow us on YouTube. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on Twitter. Wherever you get your podcast, please give us a rating of 5 stars if you can, because that really helps us out. Also, share this information with your colleagues and your friends and family. I suppose your family might not care, but I think they would, especially this particular one with Jesse and the Readiness Collective, because without them and without you guys, we couldn't do what we're doing. And also reach out to our sponsors as well, because without them, we couldn't bring you the quality program that we are bringing you. So, Brian, see you guys next week.
Thanks for having us, guys.